Welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly podcast featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 221, Honor Your Ancestors. And now your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to The Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice Anderson. I'm the host, and I'm here today in person in 818 Studios with my producer.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 221 of The Authentic Spiritual Journey. As always, we welcome you to a brand new week. And you know what? It's been since the lockdown that you've been into the studio recording.
I know, it's so cool. We keep saying it's like the old days. And, it took me a minute to kind of get in the vibe and the groove because we had the other recording project right before, but I'm thrilled to be here in the studio today and happy to have you along, friends, for the ride. And the sound is awesome in here, so it should be great in here today.
Yeah, it's really good to have you back. But yeah, I was a little out of practice, because when we were in the flow of it, I mean, the studio was really set up to do it. Like, there's no video to accompany today because over the last, 2.5 years, going on 3 years.
Yeah, right.
Kind of converted the studio into a music production studio as opposed to a kind of a modular. We could do I would have to do some reconstructive surgery in here to set it up to where we could do filming like we used to.
Right.
But yeah, it's really good to have you physically in the same space. And it was really good to record, the recording project earlier. But thank you, listeners, for joining us for another episode. And I hope you're feeling and vibing off of the energy that we've been vibing on since, I guess, now for about 2 hours.
I was going to say for hours.
2 or 3 hours. Yeah.
For hours, yeah. And I know many of you listen as you drive, as you work, and that's always really, really cool. I also want to thank those of you who take the time to donate to support the show, because without your support, we wouldn't be on the air. And we're just thinking about, an event. We were just talking right before coming on about doing another big event that, that we could open up as a fundraiser. And our last event, it was invitation only for those who had financially supported us. And it was just a gift, really, to the people who've supported us. Everyone left with some swag. I felt so rich at providing swag and doing that amazing, our 200th episode. So give us feedback if you'd be interested in coming to an event that would support the show financially. That would be super awesome. So we're going to be praying on that and thinking on that over the next several weeks, like what would support our next steps on the show. And because I really want to reach more people. I feel like we've plateaued a little bit, and an influx of financial support would really help us buy more advertising. And frankly, friends, that's one of the ways, that's one of the things that really helps. That and you liking and subscribing and rating, the show. So I think sometimes we get so used to just listening to shows we like, we forget to do the extra little step. And it only takes a few minutes. And frankly, I don't ever rate the shows. I just rated it the other day. I gave myself 5 stars.
I think that's okay. If you're not proud of your own work, then what are we doing here?
Yeah. Exactly.
I also wanted to call attention, if our keen listeners probably picked up on the fact that last week we did not have a break in the middle. And this is this is a conscious choice that we are trying just to keep the flow of things going. We are pushing forward, and we're recording instead of doing 2 15 or 20 minute blocks. We're doing one longer block so that it could be just flow in and not have that interruption. Which means that anytime there are any classes or anything that we want to let you know about, whether it's a sponsor or an upcoming class or a book series or whatever, instead of interrupting the podcast episode in the middle, we're going to be telling you on the front end of that. So hopefully that will feel a little bit more continuous for you and not really kind of interrupt things. It's 220 episodes worth of habit that we have to break.
Right. Exactly.
But hopefully you're digging it and you're enjoying it. And you let us know. You can head out to experienceofthesoul.com/contact and let us know. And can we go ahead and talk about the feed itself?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
So if we have a lot of very, very great programming here at the Experience of the Soul podcast channel, from the Authentic Spiritual Journey to the Unity North Tampa weekly messages, Dr. Donna Bevanley and Monique McDonald with The Magnetic Voice. However, we have gotten some feedback from some folks who might have wanted to maybe just hear like the Authentic Spiritual Journey. And so we now have that opportunity. You have the opportunity to listen and subscribe to the Authentic Spiritual Journey directly. And if some of those other shows, maybe you're not as interested in those, they're still going to be there. Go experienceofthesoul.com. I would encourage you to not unsubscribe from either. But if you really want to get just the Authentic Spiritual Journey in your podcast feed, then you can search for the Authentic Spiritual Journey in the podcast catcher of your choice. And by the time this comes out, September 12th, it should be well ensconced within, Google Play and Apple Podcasts and Spotify and all of that. But we're really excited about that. And this is also going to allow us to bring a much more targeted messaging to you. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it wouldn't hurt my feelings if you wanted to just download one of the other shows as well.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on where you are on the journey. Like, I've been working with some people in recovery and recently, in my client base, and they have really gotten a great deal out of Dr. Donna Bevanley's show. I've had some other people who've, done spiritual and emotional work for a long time and are vibing a little bit more with Monique's show. So it depends on where you are on the journey, and we just really honor that. And that's another way we're trying to serve your needs, is to make sure you can choose easily what you want and what supports you the most. So there are some fees associated with that. They're not exorbitant, which is why we could do them. But again, it's another way we're trying to support your journey and you being able to really focus what most supports you in terms of the shows we're putting out.
Yeah. And just for clarification, at this point right now, The Magnetic Voice and Healing Your Family Legacy are not in their own feeds. It's something that we're looking at and we're making plans for, but we're kind of rolling this out slowly. But as of right now, the Authentic Spiritual Journey is available on its own feed, but nothing else will change as far as the show. You can the content, you can always go to experienceofthesoul.com. You can stay subscribed. You don't have to change a thing. This is really just for those folks who are specifically looking for this show.
Of course, that means a lot to me. That honors me and it honors your journey. And that word honor is in the show's title today. Right. So Dave, give us that, if you will.
The title of today's episode is Honor Your Ancestors. Honor your ancestors.
Friends, I wanted to do this. I've wanted to do this show for a long time. Honor your ancestors. And I'm sure there's somebody out there saying, oh, you don't know mine. Well, there have always been people that have come before us in our family lineage and, or some people say lineage. I've never been totally sure. But I feel a real call to this. Because a real call to bring it up into our consciousness, because I think our happy, healthy ancestors, those ones that are out there, are actually providing a lot of support for our spiritual journey. They're actually there kind of in the ethers, helping us, supporting us, guiding us, giving us ideas. We might think it's our angels. We might think it's our spirit guides. And I think at times it can be those ancestors who have gone before. And their memory lives not only, like I say, in the ethers where their souls are still living, but the memory lives within us and our memories of them. And so there's this kind of awareness. There's this knowing that at times for me, that as something happens, I would say, what would my dad have done in this situation? What would my grandmother have said? And there's other times I just feel what's mine to do. And I say, oh, that reminds me of, Granny Anderson or Granny Bailey or, whatever. And so I just wanted to bring that up into your consciousness to think, there may be support available for you. There may be energy there for you that has been supporting you. And maybe you haven't noticed, right? Maybe you haven't honored that. I had a situation recently. I went with a couple friends to Casadega, and those of you who live abroad may have never heard of Casadega Spiritualist Center, but it was a lot of fun. I had only been there one other time and did not have a very good experience. So it was fun to go back for a real specific reading. And I had someone there. Pick up on one of my ancestors who had passed on, and they did a real special reading of my nephew who had passed. And I had just spoken about him in a message, a couple days before. So the energy was really up and present. And the things I had said and thought since his passing got confirmed. They were helpful and supportive of my journey now. And it was just fun. It was just fun to know that this energy that I was so invested in my nephew who had passed, was really honoring me through coming forward and speaking to me. So now, as I'm saying this, if you don't know, or if these ideas are new to you, or you don't know about, souls being able to communicate with us here and now, well, they certainly can. And we can do that on our own, certainly. But sometimes it helps to have a person or a channel help facilitate that, so that the messages can be brought through more clearly. And I found this to be super, super supportive of my journey. And it even helped me release some idea that I had not helped him enough, right? So I don't know what your story might be. Your story might be different. Maybe there was a grandmother that raised you, that's been passed on a long time. And so we remember them, yes, and we bring them forward in our thoughts, yes. But I think the main way we honor our ancestors is by our growth, by our living into our next steps, by honoring our journey, by honoring the legacy they left, and still evolving forward. Because one day you're going to be the ancestor. So today is really about, yes, honoring your ancestors, but about owning your own path, your own journey, and realizing you're not going to be on planet Earth forever. You've got a limited time. As my dear friend says, we all have an expiration date. So eventually, you're going to be an ancestor and you're going to leave a legacy behind. So think about that. Just breathe into that. I've said a lot.
Growing up in California, I didn't really feel in touch with my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
And my great-grandparents passed when I was a baby, so I have no memory of them. But I felt like, and I think any military child probably feels this, growing up far removed from your extended family.
Oh, right.
But I definitely felt like there was something I missed. And I remember when my father retired and we moved from San Diego to High Point, North Carolina, I felt, and we all did, all the Croft kids felt disassociated, from this really extended family who had all grown up together, and frequently went over to grandma's, and every, Sunday would have lunch or after church. And so I remember that being really, really tough, to the point now where I still don't really have a close relationship to any of my cousins and my aunts and uncles and and my grandparents. I knew and I loved them as far as you can, but I didn't really know them. And so that's something I feel like I really kind of missed out on. And I feel it kind of affecting the way that I relate to my nieces and nephews. And I don't know if that's really kind of on topic here, but this just kind of came up feeling separated from them, growing up
Yeah,
in those
exactly.
formative years, that the age just 5 to 15, the super
Yeah.
formative years, and having no real relationship with my grandparents or great grandparents.
Well, and Dave, I'm glad you mentioned it because I think a lot of us are in that circumstance today. I mean, it was so different, say, 60 or 70 years ago, 50 years ago, even. Most people didn't move the way we do now. A lot of kids move every 2 or 3 years based on where their parents are working, or like
Yeah.
you say, military family, which was your
Hmm.
situation, and and it's true, there may not be a feeling of connection, but there is some kind of connection there. And that's just what I want to bring to light as
Mm.
well. And there may even be a way to, like one of the ways I've really tapped into my ancestors is I did a ancestry.com. I joined ancestry.com years ago. And first it was to do the, oh, what do you call it? The DNA test.
Right.
And then as we worked on it, I started a family tree. And I've gone back to the 1600s
Oh, wow.
on my family tree by researching, and the records of ancestry.com is really amazing. I promise they're not paying me to do this spot, but it's been really interesting to discover things about my family. Literally, you can find articles, you can find you know, uh, birth certificates, marriage certificates. I found out one of my ancestors was used in a prisoner trade during the Civil
Oh,
War.
man.
I've learned all kinds of interesting things about my family members. And interestingly, we may be honoring our ancestors and we don't even know
Right.
it.
Yeah. Shannon is really big on Ancestry,
Hmm.
and Ancestry.com. She has traced her family tree back to Charlemagne.
Wow, that is
Yeah,
amazing. Well, she would be a real genius on the way those websites
absolutely.
work. I kind of limp along in it a little bit, but I've gotten it done, and we had a lot written down. That's awesome though
Yeah,
to go back that
yeah,
far.
and I mean, I remember when we first started dating, a couple of years into dating, and she would drive me around areas of like Stanley County, North Carolina. Well, this is where, Grandma Lonnie or whatever used to live, and the house that they grew up in, and great grandma, whatever. And so it was really interesting seeing her, although her father was a DJ and they moved around, it wasn't, 3,000 miles away. And so she has been able to trace back a lot. But you mentioned, I do kind of tap into my Germanic roots.
Yes.
I claim that for what it's worth.
Yes, remember we talked about this a little bit when
Yeah.
we had John Two Hawks
Yeah.
on, about even though a lot of times we want to minimize what our heritage is. We say, "Oh, I'm Heinz 57." He goes, "No, no, you're 100% of whatever
Hmm. Yeah.
percentage that is. It's not like you're partially German. You're all German,
Hmm.
right? You're
Yeah.
all of that." And yeah, so friends, I don't know if you've thought anything about it. The other thing I really love to do, Dave, is as you were talking about, your German roots, just to do research on the culture itself, and you might be surprised what you learn and what's kind of carried through, in the family line unconsciously that
Yeah.
is cultural.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do that. One of the things I discovered in my own journey, it's been really interesting. I think I mentioned a couple times on the show that my grandfather was a minister in Orlando, and so was my great grandfather. And when I took the job to first move to Orlando, I did not know that at that time. And the grandfather, who was a minister here, actually died when my mom was pregnant with me. So I never knew him either, Dave. So
Oh,
it's
wow.
similar. I never knew my grandfather, but evidently I followed in his footsteps because he had also been a minister. He had been a missionary in Brazil. And when I was 15, I did a mission trip to Brazil. So, like, and then after I, moved to Orlando, my mom was telling me a story about something about when her grandmother died and they took her body to Orlando. I mean, it was a real random story out of nowhere. And I said, "Wait, did you say your grandmother was buried in Orlando?" She said, "Yeah, they took her body to Orlando the next day." I said, "Well, I never knew that." And I thought, "Well, I'm going to call the oldest cemetery in Orlando," and which was 5 minutes from my house. And my great grandparents were buried there.
Wow.
So it's just been a real interesting journey for me to see how, even though it was not conscious, I wasn't trying to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. There was some aspect, maybe I was completing something for the family that I was not even consciously aware of. But he had done mission work in Brazil. I had done mission work in Brazil. He had been a minister in Orlando. I am a minister in Orlando. Well, I just was talking to a family member the other day about how much I love Tarpon Springs, which is it's about a half hour from my from Unity, North Tampa. And I was saying, well, if I ever bought a home over there, it would probably be in Tarpon because I like the town, I like the vibe. There's a lot of water, you know. Anyway, and my sister said something that I was talking to her about that. And my sister said to me out of the blue, "Oh, that's funny. I guess our family always goes back to Tarpon Springs." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Well, granddad owned a seasonal restaurant in Tarpon Springs. The same grandfather that I followed his footsteps this whole time." And that was almost eerily similar, right? It was crazy. So I think one of the ways, I'm seeking to honor my ancestors is by living a good life. And I think there's a lot of unconscious ways I must be circling back or completing something for the family that I wasn't even aware of. But when I get these stories and I have these awarenesses, it makes me know, well, I am connected to something other than myself. I am connected to something other than my son and those I care about. That there is some familial impact and some line of, I don't, succession is not the right word, but there is some honoring of this spiritual path I'm on by living my best life. I'm somehow honoring my ancestors. So think about that, friends. Are you honoring your ancestors with the life you're living today? This is a wonderful thing to think about, I think. If I get really, really quiet and I think about who in my family had the greatest impact, without a lot of thought, I can say both my grandmothers, my father, my nephew who passed. These are the ones that, when I'm making a decision, that's what I go to. Like they had, all of them had some kind of innate wisdom that I learned from. Like one was a really incredible cook. And sometimes when I'm in the kitchen, like I was making something the other day and I could just feel her in there talking to me. The same thing happened with my mom. I didn't mention my mom as an ancestor, I guess, because she died so recently that, in the last couple of years that I'm just getting to the point now that I'm kind of hearing and feeling her influence, which did also happen in the kitchen the other day. I was about to use a spice. I heard her go, "No, not that one, that one." So that's a lot of fun. But when I think of my grandmothers, the wisdom, the guidance, the patience, the way they would listen, the way they would kind of help me in these, unspoken ways. That teaches me to do that for others. And I think that's a great way to honor your ancestors. And you might say, well, what if my ancestors were bad? Well, we all have ancestors that, and there were even aspects to even all the people I just mentioned, that there's certainly some negative aspects. So what we try to do is call forth the most positive ones. And we honor them for their journey because it was a soul's journey. It wasn't about doing everything right. It was about a soul journey. right? So we take what we can, in 12 step, we learn take what you like and leave the rest. And so you honor, give thanks for, live into some of the positives. And if there weren't positives that you can think of right off, you probably learned a new way as a reaction to the negative. That still is honoring, right? That still is honoring because you're trying to live your best life. You're trying to move your life forward by learning the lessons. And what I believe is absolutely true as we heal, that we heal 7 generations back and 7 generations forward as we do the healing work in the soul. Because as we think about time in our, linear construct of third dimension, we think that time is linear. But as we heal, we're actually healing our ancestors and those yet even to be born. We heal it through our DNA. We heal it in the ethers. We heal it on a cellular level, right? So if you've never done any reading about quantum physics or the way we're all intimately connected, what we know now is science is literally proving some of the spiritual ideas we've held for a very long time about our interconnectedness and our oneness. So that said, all healing impacts and honors both your ancestors, those who've gone before, and those yet even to be born. They're probably all talking somewhere in the middle right now and laughing at us, thinking that time is linear. So this might be a new idea for you. Look it up. Do some research. Think about it. Think about those ancestors. How are you living into what you learned from them? How are you expanding what you learned from them? How are you leaving their old behaviors behind and moving into your new ones? The ones that you were meant to live. What I've noticed is a lot of people I've worked with, if they are still holding a lot of negative issues about the past, past relatives, the way they were raised, what happens is they hold on to them so tightly that they, in fact, become the very thing they don't like. So one of the ways we honor our ancestors is to heal.
Yeah, that's, the last few years, we've seen
Yeah.
a lot of America reconciling with much of its past,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's Confederate monuments or, privilege and all of that kind of thing. And not to drudge that up, but we're talking about ancestors and healing through that, that comes to mind here for me.
Yes. Well, aren't you doing some other work about that too, you and your friend?
Yeah. Me and my best friend from high school, well, from middle school, actually.
Right.
We have our own podcast. It's called Old School, Old Friends. And it's just me and Saul talking life, politics, relationship. Right. And he is an African American and I am, Caucasian, right? White guy, black, and he's a black guy. And we just literally grew up on different sides of the tracks in High Point,
Yep. Right. Oh, and it would have been very divided. Yes.
Yeah. This was,
North Carolina you're talking about, right? Yeah.
Late 80s. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Late 80s, North Carolina. Forget about it. Yeah.
And so yeah, that's what we're talking about. And he has a really interesting take on things like reconciling the past and Confederate monuments specifically and critical race theory. And again, not to feel political here, but we've had to take a sobering look at our own ancestors and and how our ancestors might have treated your ancestors. And and how do you do we just tear it all down and say, nope, this didn't happen? Or do we tear it all down and make sure that we're not memorializing it? And yeah, it can be a real challenge. And I remember when all the George Floyd, stuff started happening, I called Saul up and I was just like, man, I'm just so sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from the resident straight white guy on the podcast, I've my ancestors, my straight white ancestors have not had a stellar track record historically. And so it can be a real challenge to feel like you're honoring your ancestors. When you
Exactly.
go back.
Hmm.
I mean, like, for example, I know that my grandparents fled Germany in World War II, because they didn't agree with the Nazis. But I don't know about their parents.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so, yeah. Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with all this, but just
Well, it's
it
just
drudges it all up.
right. Well, it is a real journey, and it is a journey to self-awareness. And even Dave, I'm glad you mentioned that, because those things do live in our blood, right? Those things do live in our blood, and it doesn't mean they have to continue to. I mean, that's the healing piece, is that we, can like kind of, I don't know, this is a term I use, kind of wiggle around in it to try to
Right.
figure out what is still ours.
Right.
And sometimes knowing some of those things, even though it's hard initially to see, to know about some of those aspects of our ancestors, the racism, the whatever, homophobia, the
Hmm.
sexism, all of those type things, uh, the good news is, once you can begin to see, well, what am I holding on to unconsciously, right? So we often talk about becoming conscious beings, right? Right. We say the whole thing is we're trying to become conscious. Well, if you don't know what's there, it becomes very difficult
Yeah.
to become conscious. So as you learn more about your past, and you are kind of sometimes feel slapped in the face with it, it's like, oh gosh, that hurts just to know that. Well, the good news is that then creates a possibility for healing, because you are not your ancestors. You are not making those same choices today. And what I know, Dave, about you, I mean, I don't, white and straight or not, which, I often jokingly say all my friends are white straight men. Actually, they're not. It's all, it's either straight men or all black people. Those are all my friends. I have almost no women friends. And, but I know who you are. And I mean, I tell you right now, white straight guys really get a bad rap. So, I know who you are, and I know the type of person you are, that you and Saul, right?
Yeah.
Are doing this work together. So I'm kind of wanting to see for you a little self-forgiveness, because you're not that aspect of your ancestors. That's what I mean. You're evolving forward, but knowing some of that's there, that might be why some of the guilt gets triggered. Some of the white guilt gets triggered, because that's not who you are or how
Yeah.
you operate in the world, but it's who your ancestors have been.
Yeah.
Right?
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's all good stuff. So and in the native traditions, it's really a part of the tradition to really honor those who've gone before, and you honor where you get your blood from, and and things like that. But for me, and the way I was thinking about this show, it was just about, learning from the past and living into my next best life as one of the greatest ways to honor my ancestors, because I'm taking what I know, I'm gleaning whatever wisdom I can, and then healing those places which are broken. And what I've seen in my own family, I have one son, and what I've seen is that he started where I am in consciousness. And I worked very, very hard to get here. And what I know is that he is going to be more healed than I have been. And that as he has kids, as they develop, as they grow, as he matures, that they're going to be also moving our family lineage forward into more and more healing. So for me, that's the purpose of today, is to just remember, yes, who we are, where we come from, and also know one day we're going to be the ancestors leaving behind a legacy. And the question always is, will we be happy with what we left? And this is why we do our show, The Authentic Spiritual Journey, because our goal is to grow, to prosper, to evolve forward, to move our lives forward, to live our best life, living from love, living from peace, realizing we are connected, realizing we are one, supporting one another on the journey, lifting each other up, seeking to be a blessing and to be blessed. This is our goal, dear friend. We know you're with us in this. We know you are seeking to live your best life. And I hope you know you're not alone in it. There's some people that came before, your ancestors. Without them, you would not be here. So there's gratitude mixed in with that as well. So we are glad you joined us along the journey today. We're always so blessed and delighted that you listen. And I'm right now especially grateful for the financial support. We are looking to, as I mentioned, to do some more advertising and to spread the news even more about the work we're doing on the channel, and your financial support makes that possible. So we thank you. We bless you, dear friend, and blessings on the journey. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2022, Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission from RR Hot Publishing. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.